Folks, we are back on the W.A.D.E Concept presented by The Ring Magazine, and today we have breaking news as Dana White has found his TV rights deal, and I think everybody knew this was kind of coming down the line, but now it's official. Dana White has partnered Zuffa Boxing, their TKO's boxing arm, with, drumroll please, Paramount Plus. I mean, yes, we expected it. It is now official. Dana White and Zuffa Boxing to stream 12 events on Paramount Plus in 2026 as a part of long-term media rights deal. Now, Dana has done a ton of interviews on this, so we're going to look at this press release on the Ring Magazine's website. Then we're going to take a look at some of the sound bites from what he had to say about this deal, because I think it is going to be a major, major win for the sport of boxing, especially right here in the good old US of A. What do I mean? The breakdown. Let's go.
He is the star of W.A.D.E Concept.
Paramount announced a partnership with Zuffa Boxing on Monday morning that will take the company to the exclusive streaming and TV partner for the new promotional company in January. So number one right there, Zuffa Boxing kicks off in January 2026 on Paramount Plus. 12 events, like we said. The deal will begin with 12 boxing cards on Paramount Plus in 2026 and is expected to grow in later years. It is also possible that select boxing events will eventually be broadcast by CBS, who's also owned by Paramount, and other linear Paramount platforms. So, what does this mean? Well, number one, I assume, because the way that the verbiage has been tossed out right now, Dana White will have the contender-style boxing fights for Zuffa Boxing on Paramount Plus. 12 to start in 2026, maybe more as the year goes on, but it's essentially once a month. And there's a little Easter egg in there that talks about select boxing events eventually being broadcast on CBS, which right now I don't think would be the boxing equivalent of a contender series, because the UFC has already signed a streaming deal, a TV rights deal with Paramount Plus, and they had somewhat of a similar structure where the UFC numbered events, what used to be called the pay-per-view events, would be on CBS, and the fight night events and contender stuff and whatever else would be on Paramount Plus. I have a feeling Dana's going to want to do the same thing or something similar with this boxing structure, so expect, if there are massive select events, that it would potentially be like what you just saw with Canelo Crawford, with the Ring Magazine backing, with Turki Al-Sheikh involved. Dana White maybe using some of his fighters from Zuffa, maybe not, finding a way to use Zuffa Boxing as the promotional backing for those massive fights that he wants to do. Again, we'll see when, we'll see involving who, and how the whole contract situation works out. So before we get into anything else, let's talk about this CBS Paramount Plus deal. Number one, boxing really, through its entirety of the last 30 plus years, really the last 100 years, has suffered from a lack of vision. And I mean, yes, on the promotional side, a vision to grow the sport, a vision to reinvest into the sport, a vision to have a one-lane, straight-through road to the top of this sport, and talk about that in a little bit. But what I really mean is vision from the public, especially since the rise of closed-circuit television, pay-per-view, and everything else. When you put boxing behind a massive paywall, and yes, Paramount Plus will still have a paywall, but when you made it less and less and less affordable for the common man to watch a common man's sport, less and less and less people watch the sport in general. So not only did you start to miss out on seeing some of the biggest stars in the sport, but also you missed out on creating the next generation of big stars in the sport. And what I mean is the fighters on the undercards of those massive pay-per-views that normally, if you had seen them on syndicated television, could potentially build into the next big superstar in the sport of boxing, they weren't seen by as many people in the general public, so building them became that much more difficult. And sure, you had your unicorns, you had your Mike Tysons, you had your Canelo Alvarez's, your Floyd Mayweathers, your Oscar De La Hoyas, and a few more on that list that were big stars in an American market. But you didn't have that natural want from the American public to see boxing, and therefore you didn't have the want from kids to get into the sport. When now you're going to see boxing on Paramount Plus and eventually on CBS, on syndicated television, on every single television in damn near every single home in the United States, you're talking about an audience that you can't even reach with ESPN and all of those people getting to see boxing without so many roadblocks. What I think you may start to see is, because there's more eyes on this sport, because there's going to be a familiarity in America with boxing again, Dana White, Zuffa Boxing, consistently in front of your eyes, not Here's an event one time a year. Here's an event twice a year. And then we pack the bags and go home until we can raise enough money and raise enough interest for another major event. Consistently reinvesting into the sport, consistently getting in front of an American public's eyes. That not only can showcase the next wave of boxing, but can create the next generation of kids that want to be their favorite athlete that may just so happen to be one of the boxers they see on Zuffa Boxing, one of the boxers they see on Paramount Plus or CBS in their household. That is why I think this is such a major deal for specifically here in the United States. Because if we're being honest, right now, the sport in the United States specifically is an afterthought. And I hate to say it that way, but it's just the truth. And to really take boxing to the next level, just like UFC, just like NFL, just like NBA, MLB, outside of soccer, these are the most profitable sports in the world. And I think even if you go league for league, the NFL is the most profitable league in the world. This market is the most advertiser friendly. It is the most sports ready audience in the world. So you need an American audience. And again, you need Americans to be interested in boxing. I think this is another step toward that. CBS is the most watched broadcast network in the United States. This is what I'm talking about. This is why it is so major. This is why you saw football grow the way it did on CBS. You saw basketball grow the way it did on ABC. This is why I'm so pumped about this, because CBS has hosted some of the biggest sports in this country, and they have grown exponentially in their interest over the years. Paramount Plus and CBS will also become the exclusive home of the UFC starting in January. We talked about that. And a $7.7 billion TV rights deal. Doesn't sound like a lot when compared to the NFL or the NBA, but seeing as the UFC sold in 2016 for $4 billion, the entire company sold for that number. To then turn around and get a TV rights deal for 7 years, $7.7 billion is absolutely insane. And it should tell you as a consumer what Dana White can potentially do with boxing using somewhat of a similar model to the UFC, which I think is going to happen in boxing. And again, there may be some drawbacks to that we have to address as well. But maybe I'm just being an optimist. I can see this being a big reason why boxing grows in the United States. This kind of exposure, this kind of support, this kind of backing from Turki Al-Sheikh and Riyadh Season and the Ring Magazine, TKO behind it. It is almost no way this can really fail, especially now that you have the TV rights deal. This was massive. This partnership with Paramount reinforces our vision to redefine the way viewers consume boxing, Turki Al-Sheikh said in a statement. More fight fans will now have access to watch some of our most exciting boxers around. We will have seen the proof that the appetite is there. This is the future for live boxing coverage and will ensure that the sport continues to thrive. And y'all are going to say, because I have a Ring Magazine sign sitting right there, that I'm glazing, but I agree with him. This, I think, is a potential way for boxing to get reinvestment and ensure the growth of the sport, that the sport continues to grow and thrive. Not that necessarily specific promoters thrive in the sport or that the very top end of the sport survives and thrives, but that the sport from top to bottom survives and thrives and grows. That is what I see happening by proxy of really Zuffa Boxing becoming the entity that I think it will become. The Zuffa Boxing Paramount partnership will expose prospects, contenders, and eventually world champions to an expansive audience. Announcements regarding Zuffa Boxing's first show on Paramount Plus will be made at a later date. Here's a quote from Dana White. "I'm excited to bring great boxing events to a global audience. There are millions of boxing fans that will now be able to watch competitive fights with up-and-coming boxers, as well as the biggest stars in the sport. Paramount will be the home of the UFC and boxing fans to watch the greatest fights in combat sport." So again, you're seeing potentially the trajectory of Zuffa Boxing, as it'll start with probably a prospect level roster. And again, there's been rumors out there. I think Dana White was in an interview today with Brian Campbell that we're going to watch in a second, saying that him and his matchmakers were looking at 450 fighters that they potentially could sign. Now, I don't know how that works out over a 12-fight schedule, which I think they'll probably cut the roster down. But being that ambitious to start tells you how much they want to ramp up their fight cards quickly. And it also shows you that they're going to go at this alone. They are not going to look to other promoters or anybody else. Dana White is going to take this ship with Turki Al-Sheikh, and they're going to have Zuffa Boxing be its own entity, be its own league. And I assume when they talk about contenders and eventually world champions, that means they're also going to have their own world champions, which is going to shake up boxing for sure, because right now we have the alphabet sanctioning bodies, and I got to be honest, all four of them combined have not done much to take boxing to another level. I know that there are places for boxers and fighters to go to have more opportunities, but I have never understood the idea of having four different sanctioning bodies and each one of them be able to call their champion the champion of the world. To then have to have those four go into like a super-seeded tournament and fight each other to potentially then become the undisputed champion of the world. And that should be your title as you win the world championship anyway. One pathway, one direct line to the championship, and one baddest man on the planet. That's how I want to see the sport of boxing. I think that's the most sensible way to see the sport of boxing. Not mandatory for this sanctioning body, mandatory for this sanctioning body, mandatory. The belts get split up. Everybody is a 1/4 champion of the world, and no one really knows who the baddest is because they don't have to fight each other. So let's take a look at some of these sound bites from Dana White as he was on CBS Sports with our guy, Brian Campbell.
I mean, look, if I'm being honest, boxing in this country, the United States, has kind of taken a hit in recent years. I know everything under the TKO banner is
kind of taking a hit. Boxing in the United States over the last 20, 30 years, from a viewership and business standpoint, it's been abysmal.
Global thing, UFC, WWE. But are you looking mostly for U.S., locations, arenas? Could we see events at the UFC Apex? Could this be a shot in the arm, I guess, is what I'm asking right away for American boxing?
Here's the truth. If you want a successful boxing business, and there's guys who've made money, and, my idea of success and other guys' idea of success are completely different. And even if you're the Saudis, you cannot have a successful boxing business without the United States. You have to have a strong presence in the U.S. So yes, that is going to be my goal, is to rebuild boxing in the United States.
He is absolutely 1,000% correct. And what he said there also makes sense. Like, yes, you have your Matchrooms, you have your Queensberries, you have your one-off promotions that will have success as a promotion. That isn't success for the sport of boxing. That's success for Matchroom. That's success for Queensberry. That's success for whatever it is they do with their roster of fighters and their business dealings, not the entirety of the sport. Not necessarily bad for the sport, but it also doesn't help grow the sport, especially, again, in the biggest market in the world, which is the United States. Here in the U.S., we have Top Rank, we have Golden Boy, we have MVP now, we have PBC, and they've all had successes in individual circumstances, but no centralized, continued elevation of the sport and viewership here in the U.S. has happened. Dana's right about that. And to be successful, I think, for Dana, doing it here would absolutely revolutionize the sport. No doubt about it.
When I was a massive boxing fan, I used to watch USA's Tuesday night fights. I talk about it all the time. It was one of my favorite shows of all time. And all the big boxing stars of the 90s and pay-per-view came off of that show. I felt like back then there were very competitive fights with guys who should have been fighting each other at that time, and that's what I want to do. I mean, basically, as a boxing fan, the way that the UFC was built was all the things that I loved about boxing and all the things that I hated about boxing is how I built, the UFC and the sport. So I would expect a lot of what you saw early on in the UFC to happen with boxing now.
And again, you hear that, and that sounds pretty damn good as far as, again, a consumer perspective, a viewer perspective. What should we expect? Dana is saying you should expect guys early in their career fighting tougher tests than what we normally see in boxing. And again, I think everybody would agree that having a guy that's a high-level prospect coming out of the amateur ranks and then taking 20 fights to fight someone of similar talent or similar skill level, just because a certain promoter or manager wants to build said high-level prospect record up to give them some sort of cachet in the sport, because we've been conditioned over the same practices over years and years and years, where fighters won't fight the best, where they won't fight people of their similar skill level until a certain point in their career, to where we don't believe that they're legitimate until they have a 10-0 record, until they have a 20-0 record, and not knowing that, well, sometimes that's detrimental for the sport, because once you get that pattern of fighters not fighting high-level competition until they have to for a belt, or until they have to for a world ranking, and then they get their world ranking, then they get their belt, and the same process happens again and again and again, but it happens in 4 different sanctioning bodies. So you have 4 guys with potentially the same mentality about fighting the best when they're still making money for their sanctioning body, and everybody's self-interest get in the way of competition. Well, hold on. If you lose that fight, then the money goes away for not only you, but for the promoter and the sanctioning body, and then the sanctioning body's percentage. We're seeing it right now with Tank Davis fighting Jake Paul in an exhibition bout while he is the sitting WBA champion of the world, and the WBA won't strip him. They won't strip him because you know why? He is a money maker for them. And until he tells them he's going to retire, they're going to keep that belt on him because they want that tank percentage. And they think potentially they can still get a Lamont Roach rematch. Potentially they can get a Shakur Stevens fight. And I think it's one of the more corrupt things that happens in boxing.
One of my biggest issues is we've got 17, or if you count Bridgerweight, 18 divisions. There's 4 recognized champions per division. Some of these sanctioning bodies have been tossing out, I guess the term is bastardized extra titles for years. How many weight classes do you want in Zuffa Boxing? And I would assume we're going to be looking at 1 champion per division. Is this going to be a Zuffa championship you're going to roll out?
By the way, Brian, fantastic here with the questions, with the laying out of questions, the sprinkle of opinionated kind of what he wants to get across, but also sticking the question on Dana.
Literally had a meeting with my team yesterday on this. It's funny you're asking me this question. We're literally walking through all of that right now. We're still in the process of signing, tons of fighters. They literally showed me a list yesterday of like 450 fighters that they want to go after.
This is crazy, though. Dana's saying, again, I don't think he's saying they want to sign 450 fighters. I think they're saying they're looking at a list of 450 fighters to who they potentially want to sign. So there's like a rough draft list, and I'm sure they're going to cut that down because how do you sign a roster if they come out of the gates with 450? You want to talk about meaning business? That's a statement in its own right, I think. If you got the balls to go, you know what, 450 y'all, let's go. This is our shit, let's go. Us versus the rest of the sport. That's ballsy as fuck because as Dana's talked about in MMA, you got to guarantee fighters spots. You got to guarantee them 2-3 fights a year. And if he's going to run this league like he does the UFC, that would have to be the same. And running 12 events a year, there's no possible way he can do that. So I think he means he's going to look at that big list and cut it down. But still, out of 450, if he gets, 150 of those, that's a pretty decent sized roster.
And so we met yesterday. They're putting together a game plan off direction that I gave them. And then next week, me and Nick Khan are going to sit down with the team and start walking through weight classes and, all the other things that I've directed these guys to do in yesterday's meeting.
By the way, they absolutely should cut down on weight classes as well. I know I talked a lot about the 4 sitting champions in each division. There's so many weight classes in boxing. It is ridiculously hard to keep up with who is a champion at which weight class and how many weight classes there are and the differences between them when there's like 8 and 7 pounds sometimes between. Again, I understand the need for people to be able to fight at their natural weight, but we have to find a way to make things more concise. We have to. Dana talks about having his own Zuffa belt. I like it, but I also think that you guys need clarification. Number one, it's clear they want to do away with the sanctioning body and have Zuffa Boxing be the number 1 league in the sport. I mean, there's no other reason you would want to have your own belt. And also, I don't know if I covered it there, but there's going to be rankings based on the Ring Magazine rankings. So you're having a Zuffa belt, I assume, whatever they're going to call it, and the Ring Magazine belt. This is, I think, a long-term play to eventually try to become the number 1 power player in boxing. And again, some people are going to look at that and go, how are you going to talk about getting rid of all the sanctioning bodies when you're just adding more belts and the sanctioning bodies exist? Yeah, for now. The idea, I think everybody knows, is to replace the sanctioning body with this new way of doing boxing business. Invite newer fans into the sport based on the idea that Zuffa Boxing is the one-stop shop for where the best boxing happens. They're not trying to just have their belts and then sanctioning bodies have their belts and then you unify, because that'd be the same thing that's already happening. This is a clear sign and a clear message to the rest of boxing that Dana is saying he wants to make his league the best thing in boxing. This is a very long-term play to introduce the Zuffa League and by proxy the Zuffa belt as the number 1 belt in the sport. The most important, the most recognized. Again, it's a very easy comparison to just say, look at the UFC. When you think MMA, you think UFC. And again, it may not work that way right now because boxing has a far longer lineage and so do the sanctioning body. But this isn't a short-term play. It's a long-term one.
Will women's boxing be part of the Zuffa portfolio in the future?
Yep, definitely.
Ooh, that is also interesting as well. Obviously, right now, there's been a big surge in women's boxing with, let's be honest, MVP, Jake Paul, Nikisa Badarian have really done well to put and focus on women's boxing. Dana looking to come in and do the same. That'll be an interesting battle as well, because again, it's probably gonna be exclusive. And here's Dana talking about that.
Listen, I live in my own little bubble. I'm going to do my thing. I'm not worried about what any of those guys are doing. And to be honest with you, I think those guys are all they don't think big enough. They don't think big enough. These guys have been in the business for however long, and I like Eddie Hearn. And I see what Eddie Hearn went like Oscar De La Hoya overnight, but he's got a lot of attention, so I get it.
Hold on a second. As much as I like what Dana's been saying about, this TV rights deal and what he wants to do with Zuffa Boxing, Eddie Hearn did not go Oscar De La Hoya on him, at least not from what I saw. And I asked Dana about this in the interview I did with him on Radio Row in Vegas. Eddie has just essentially said what he thought. He was like, I just don't know if it's going to work. Boxing has been around for a long time. It's not the UFC where he was kind of the only show in town, and I don't know if what he's trying to do is going to work. But he also said that I want to compete with Dana. I look forward to competing with him and that I like him. I don't think he came out and was like doing clapback Thursdays like Oscar De La Hoya and taking personal shots at Dana. I didn't. Maybe I missed that, but I didn't see that. I saw Eddie saying he wanted to compete, but Dana is clearly taking offense to it.
I think way bigger than you guys do. So I'm not competing with the other promoters. I'm competing with whatever takes the attention of the fans on the night that we're on television. It could be a release of a big movie. It could be the NFL. It could be your wife or your girlfriend that you got to take out that night, your kids. That's my competition.
I love it. I love that answer. Again, that's what it should be. Dana is looking at this as a business for consumers. We always call boxing the entertainment business. Who are boxers meant to entertain? Who are fighters meant to entertain by doing their sport? It's us, the people. It's the consumer of the product. How do you make that better? By giving the consumer more reason to watch your sport. Now, I know my comment section in this video is going to be very heated, that I didn't just sit here and dog Dana out or this Zuffa Boxing announcement, but what Dana is doing with Zuffa Boxing, the TV network deal, Paramount and CBS, the most watched broadcast station in the United States, having different sanctioning bodies removed from the league and only recognizing one champion, and the Ring Magazine rankings, which again, I think adds structure and adds a bit more cohesiveness to what it is they're trying to do. I think this lends to the right way of doing business in the sport of boxing. I think the sport can be healthier for it. And I think if you ever wanted to grab consistent interest back into the sport of the United States versus your one-off massive Netflix show or your one-off exhibition Jake Paul fight, you have to add some structure and consistency in the sport. And that's what Dana's trying to do. And I have to say, at least from what I'm hearing, again, we'll continue to look at it and see what the details are, but I like it. You guys let me know what you think down below. And what happens next for Zuffa Boxing? Can they find a roster that is set to fit a league? Will they have one major champion? What is Dana saying without saying it? What is he not saying? Let me know in the comments below. As far as what happens next, I don't have those answers, but guess we'll find out.